In this video, I'm going to be challenging myself to survive 100 days in hardcore Minecraft. I died only 7 days in on my first attempt at this challenge, so it's not going to be easy. My goal for the first 100 days in this world is to create the ultimate cozy farm with everything we need to survive. Kicking it off on day 1, I found myself on a barren island overlooking the ocean. Since there were no trees nearby, I made my way across the ocean with the very kind help of a dolphin. After reaching the mainland, I punched some trees and made our first wooden pickaxe. I dug a small mine where I gathered up some cobblestone so I could make a stone pickaxe. Using our new pick, I gathered up even more cobblestone and crafted the rest of the basic tools that I needed. My main objective right now is to get some food as well as find sheep so I can make a bed. After wandering around for a couple of minutes, I found some sheep that I promptly killed for their wool. I continued exploring for more resources and stumbled upon some copper as well as some coal, which was super convenient. I was getting pretty hungry at this point, so I stopped to make a furnace and cooked up some of the meat that I had collected. And while I was waiting for it to smelt, I mined more coal that I found at the surface. I went back to the furnace to grab my cooked food, and it felt so much better to not be hungry anymore. I continued exploring and found a ruined nether portal where I obtained my first iron. I noticed that it was getting dark, so I crafted a bed and dyed it pink. I quickly slept the night away before any mobs could spawn, and I thought about just how happy I was to have survived the first day. Right at the start of day 2, I used the iron that I found to create a shield, and it's not much, but I definitely feel a lot safer now. I spent the rest of the day mining all of the surface level coal and copper since it was easy to get, and I knew it would come in handy in the future. On day 3, I climbed this snowy hill to get some spruce wood and saplings. I use spruce in pretty much all of my builds, so I was stoked to be able to find some. As I continued to explore, I found another ruined nether portal, which had pretty basic loot, but it was better than nothing. I stumbled upon one of the new dogs, which was super cute, but unfortunately all I had to give it was some raw chicken, so I'll have to come back with some bones later on so that we can make this dog our friend. After that, I found a nearby cave and it had a skeleton spawner in it. I spammed torches as fast as I could since I'm pretty under-geared right now and I don't want to take on a bunch of skeletons. In the spawner chest, I found more iron as well as a saddle, which was a sweet find. My inventory was full at this point, so I went back to the surface where I found a pumpkin, and since I had no space, I just decided to sacrifice my pick for the pumpkin cause. On day 4, I tamed a horse and used my newfound saddle. Sadly, it was like the slowest horse I've ever found, but hey, we have a horse, so I guess that's cool. And right beside where I found the horse was an open area on the hillside, and I think this will be the perfect place to call home. I started off by making a small pen for our horse so he doesn't escape. After that, I crafted a new pick using the iron that I had found. I also planted a few spruce trees so I can start collecting wood for our starter house. I spent the rest of the day organizing my items and covering these cave entrances. The last thing that I want is to fall down one of these and die. On the start of day 5, I cut down the spruce tree that had grown and collected the saplings so that we can keep expanding the tree farm. One of my main goals right now is to get a level 30 enchanting setup, which is going to require a lot of paper and a lot of leather. I gathered some water using the water bucket I found earlier in the skeleton spawner and then started collecting some wheat seeds. From there, I set up a simple sugarcane and wheat farm that we can keep expanding as it grows. I still had a bit more iron, so I made some more tools and then decided to go exploring the caves down below. I found a decent amount of iron and decided to keep exploring into day 6. As I got deeper into the caves, I found my first diamonds. At first, I thought it was only one, but fortunately, there were a few more hiding behind the wall. I continued mining where I gathered a bunch more iron, coal, and redstone. I even found 2 more diamond veins, which was pretty awesome. I got a little bit carried away mining and ended up getting lost, so I just started staircasing up to the surface. And when I finally did get to the surface, the sun was just starting to rise on day 7. I was a tad bit disoriented from being in the caves for so long, and of course, I forgot to write down the coords of my starter area. While looking for my base, I found some sweet berries, which was a sweet find. Pun intended. I also had a close call with some powdered snow, which made my butt clench a little bit, but I managed to get out of it. And after finally finding where all of my stuff was, I unloaded all of my new goodies. I then spent the rest of the day expanding the wheat and sugarcane farm, as well as cutting down and replanting the spruce trees. On the start of day 8, I set up a simple cow pen and then used the iron from my mining trip to craft a full set of armor. It feels great to be a bit more geared up now. At this point, the cow pen was missing the most important thing, the actual cows, so I went searching for some. I found one pretty far away and slowly made my way back. And I only found one cow over there, so I went searching in the other direction and was able to find another cow not too far away. And now that we have 2 cows, we can breed them and finally get this cow farm going. As the sun rose on day 9, I decided to use my diamonds to craft an axe as well as a pick. Using my new axe, I cut down all of the spruce trees. I was kind of scared of cutting down the big ones, since if I fall from the top, I'm pretty sure I'll die. After cutting down the trees, I harvested all of the wheat that was ready and then expanded both the wheat and sugarcane farm. I gathered some obsidian from the nearby ruined portal and then used it to craft an enchanting table. I'll probably wait until I have some bookshelves before I enchant anything, but at least we have the enchanting table. Day 10 was pretty uneventful. I sort of felt like just exploring the surrounding area, and while doing so, I gathered up some of the sugarcane that I found, as well as dug up clay from the bottom of the river. I also found a few more caves nearby, so I did my best to light them up and collect any valuable resources that I found. Moving right into day 11, I continued to expand the wheat and sugarcane farm. After that, I bred the cows, and then I spent the rest of the day cutting down spruce trees in preparation to build our starter house. Because I'm dumb, I let it get way too dark while I was cutting down the trees, so I had to hide in the side of the mountain and sleep the night away. On day 12, I cut down the last tree that was still remaining, and then did my farm chores by expanding the wheat farm and breeding our cows. I want to build a decently sized starter house, so I'm going to need a lot of materials. A lot of the blocks that we need will be coming from under the ground, so I thought a fun way to get them would be to build a mine entrance. I went down to this lower area on the hillside and started designing the mine entrance. I started building and kept experimenting until I got it looking the way that I wanted. I added a simple spruce ceiling inside, as well as some torches so that nothing spawns. To blend the build into the surrounding area, I added some cobblestone into the ground around the entrance. And for some extra details, I put barrels and chests on both of the walls. This will also be practical since we'll have a spot to drop off materials as we're mining. I spent the rest of the day digging the hole further, as I eventually want to extend the mine all the way down to diamond level. On the start of day 14, I harvested all of the crops that were ready and expanded the farm a bit. I also bred the cows while I was at it. And I wanted to make our mine entrance look a little bit more natural, so I used some andesite stairs and slabs to get rid of all of the hard edges. Once I was happy with how it was looking, I started staircasing down until it got dark outside. I began day 15 by doing our chores, which was of course expanding the farm and breeding the cows. I was determined to make it all the way down to diamond level today, so I grabbed all of the items that I thought I would need and started digging down. I found a cave on my way down and couldn't resist exploring it. I gathered up a bunch of resources and even found a skeleton spawner that had some name tags and gold horse armor. I continued exploring the caves as well as extending our staircase down on day 16. While doing so, I got super lucky and found a bunch of diamonds. A lot of them I just found while staircasing down, so I didn't even have to do any extra work for them. On day 17, I finally made my way all the way down to Y-53, which according to Google is the best strip mining level for diamonds. While I was here, I decided to strip mine a bit for some more diamonds, as well as collect some tough and deep slate that I want to use for our starter house. My inventory was full, so I figured it was time to head back to the surface. I also placed down staircases, so it'll be easier to come back down here in the future. And it was dark once I reached the surface, so I slept at the top of the mine entrance. Afterwards, I dropped off all of my items and started smelting the ores that I had gathered. And while I was in the mine, our farm had time to grow, so I did a big harvest and collected a bunch of wheat and sugarcane. And of course, I replanted everything because I'm a good farmer like that. While breeding the cows again, I accidentally opened the gate, and I may or may not have slaughtered the ones that escaped. I had quite a few diamonds from our last mining trip, so I crafted a new pickaxe and nearly a full set of diamond armor. All I need now is some leggings. I still needed more materials for our starter house, so I went back down to the mines again to gather more blocks. I mined a bunch of tuff and even found 2 more diamond veins while I was at it. While I was down here, I also grabbed some gravel that we can use to craft coarse dirt. While strip mining, I ran into a cave that had another skeleton spawner in it. The best loot that it had was a couple of music discs, diamond horse armor, and a saddle. As day 19 rolled around, I gathered a bunch of the mossy cobblestone from the spawner room while I had the opportunity. I went back to the surface to drop off my items, and then equipped our horse with the diamond armor that we found. Using the diamonds that we got, I crafted some leggings, and we now have a full set of diamond armor. I spent the rest of the day chopping down oak and birch trees in preparation to build our starter house. I began day 20 by breeding the cows, and then I thought it'd be fun to try and tame the dog that we found all the way back on day 3. It took me a while to find the little doggo, but it was more than worth the search to have one of the new dogs by our side. After bringing him home, I made some glass bottles, since the last thing that I need for the starter house is some packed mud. Using water bottles, I turned dirt into mud, and then combined that with some wheat to get our packed mud. As the sun began to set, I finished the day off the same way that we started, by breeding the cows. On day 21, I finally began construction on our starter house. I started off with the walls, which I built using a combination of a bunch of different blocks, like blackstone, deep slate, tuff, and cobblestone. For the windows, I used the new copper grates, which honestly I'm kind of obsessed with. I made the second floor out of primarily stripped birch logs and stripped spruce logs. I feel like this gave the house a Tudor style, which I definitely wasn't complaining about. For the roof, I made the trim out of spruce wood and then filled in the rest using a combination of cobbled deep slate and deep slate bricks. I also added a horse stable attached to the side of the house, which will be super convenient. And to give our dog some shelter, I added a small covered area to the side of the house. And it may seem like a small detail, but I really love how the texturing on the chimney turned out. By the time I finished the exterior of the house, it was already day 27. With the house done, I spent the entire next day terraforming. This area on the hillside is super cool, but it generated a little bit weird and can definitely use some love. I hardly had any dirt to my name though, so I killed 2 birds with 1 stone by removing the blocks where I didn't want them, and then using those blocks to build up the areas that needed it. On the start of day 29, I removed all of the wheat and sugarcane since this temporary farm is starting to look pretty ugly next to our starter house. After that, I chopped down these 3 big spruce trees as I want to start gathering up materials to build up the interior of our house. Once all the trees were cut down and replanted, I decided to check in on our cows. Our pen is getting pretty cramped now, but at least that's a good sign that we should have enough leather to make 15 bookshelves. I spent the remainder of the day adding flowers around the outside of the house, which gave the build a nice pop of color. On day 30, I decided to finish detailing the horse stable. I started off by hanging some lanterns from the ceiling, and then I replaced the ground with a combination of coarse dirt and regular dirt. For a final little detail, I added a bit of short grass dotted around the area. And now that the stable was complete, I finally took our horse over to its new home. I was really liking the look of this coarse dirt inside of the stable, so I extended the same design over to the main entrance. I also added some coarse dirt patches in front of both of the side entrances, as well as underneath of the dog shelter. After doing a bit of basic terraforming, I added a lantern underneath of the dog shelter, and our little pup is looking super happy here. Moving into day 31, I chopped down the old horse pen as we didn't have a need for it anymore. The terrain around our house is still looking pretty jank, so I spent some time terraforming and got it looking a bit better. After that, I wanted to get started on the interior of our house, so I started by removing the ground and getting the floors in. On day 32, I walled off this section of the house, which is going to be our smelting room. To get inside of the room, I added an entrance out of polished and chiseled tuff blocks. I continued detailing the room by adding a ceiling using stripped spruce logs and spruce stairs. With the ceiling done, I added a couple of lanterns to light up the area. And since this is our smelting room, I added some furnaces against the wall, and then created a small seating area using birch stairs and a crafting table. I added one last detail to the smelting room, and that was an armor stand where I displayed our original armor from this world. With one of the rooms done, I continued working on the interior by adding in a staircase to get up to the second floor. Of course, we actually need to build the second floor, so after experimenting with a few different blocks, I decided on a combination of stone and stone bricks. I ran out of blocks though, and had to finish putting in the floor on day 34 after more of my cobblestone had finished smelting into stone. Next, I fixed up the walls on the second floor so that there wasn't a weird gap anymore. After that, I continued the interior by dividing up the main room on the first floor, and then I moved over all of my items to some different chests just so that they weren't so in the way anymore. I was determined to get the interior done, so I continued working on it on day 35. I added a wall beside the staircase, and as a result, we created this secret room under the stairs. I love it a lot, it's giving me major Harry Potter vibes. I even added some hidden storage where we can hide our valuables. Unfortunately, the wall we added landed right where one of the windows was, but I was able to just move the window over a couple of blocks and it still looked totally fine. Heading back inside, I added a deep slate tile trim to the bottom of the interior walls, which really helped break up all of the gray tones. I spent the remainder of the day reworking our storage area. I rotated all of the chests by 90 degrees, and I think it fits the space a lot better. On day 36, I continued working on the storage room. I created the ceiling by placing alternating rows of spruce slabs and oak trapdoors. I placed in more chests, as well as some functional details like a crafting table and a stone cutter. We still had this blank wall near the entrance, so I thought it'd be fun to use one of the new paintings that we got in the latest update. The next area that I wanted to work on was the bedroom. I started by creating a plant using a composter and oak leaves, and then I made a small shelf above the bed. To bring some color into the room, I created a rug using blue carpet and lapis blocks. One of my favorite things to do in this game is to create maps, so I spent the rest of the day crafting maps and item frames so that we can display a map of the area in our bedroom. On day 38, I walked around and revealed the 4 maps that we just made. After getting back home, I placed the maps on the wall, and it's really cool to see how our starter house looks from a bird's eye perspective. I spent the remainder of the day adding in final touches to the bedroom, like a lantern, a book inside of the chiseled bookshelf, and another flower pot on the shelf. And with that, I'm happy to call the bedroom finished. Moving up to the second floor, I started planning where I wanted things with some dirt. I want to put an enchanting setup in here, so I kind of have to plan the rooms around that. Once I was happy with the general layout, I placed in a wall using spruce planks. I also added a railing for the staircase using some oak trapdoors. I'm addicted to copper right now, so I had to place in a copper door, and then after that, I added a stripped spruce trim to the bottom of the wall. I made the ceiling using deep slate bricks and cobbled deep slate with a stripped spruce log beam in the middle. I really like adding beams into my ceilings so that way I can hang lanterns from them. On day 40, I completed the first room on the second floor, and I'm quite happy with how it came out. Moving over to our enchanting room, I copied the same ceiling design that we used on the other side. After that, I went outside and bred the cows, and then it was time to go on a killing spree to collect a bunch of leather for books. I started day 41 by crafting 15 bookshelves for our enchanting room. Now we can get rid of all of this temporary dirt and replace it with our actual bookshelves. I also added the other blocks that we might need for enchanting, like a smithing table, grindstone, and anvil. I spent the rest of the day adding final details to the room, and I think it turned out quite well if I do say so myself. On day 42, I crafted a diamond sword, and then since I had over 30 levels, I decided to do some enchanting. First, I enchanted my pick, and I got Fortune 2, which I was pretty happy with since this will help us get more diamonds in the future. After that, I enchanted my boots, and I got Feather Falling 3. This is going to be super helpful for not taking unnecessary fall damage. After enchanting, I started organizing all of my items since my chests are an absolute disaster right now. I continued organizing into day 43, which I'll quickly skip past since it's not the most entertaining thing in the world. I did add item frames to the sides of the chests though, which will help me remember where things go. By the end of the day, my chests were all organized, which was super satisfying to see. And with that, I'm comfortable saying that the interior of the house is finished. It took a while, but I'm really happy with the result, and I'm excited to get started on the next project. On day 44, I went into the mines to gather more tough blocks, as well as look for more diamonds. I found 10 diamonds, and then stumbled upon a zombie spawner. While I was here, I gathered up all of the mossy cobblestone, which I'm sure will come handy in the future. I went back home after that, and crafted a diamond axe with the diamonds that we just found. And since I was back to level 30, I also enchanted my shovel and ended up getting Silk Touch. I wanted to make our mine easier to get to, so on day 45, I built a staircase on the hillside using spruce stairs. After that, I created a path leading from our house to the staircase, and then from the staircase over to the mine entrance. I thought it would look cool to make the hill around the mine entrance look more like a solid cliff face. To accomplish this look, I started replacing the blocks around the entrance with a combination of tough, cobblestone, and mossy cobblestone. I continued on day 46 by scattering some large boulders on the hillside. This also adds to the story of where the resources are coming from that the house is built out of, and it's always just kind of fun to add these little elements of storytelling. With the boulders done, I proceeded to spend the next 7 days terraforming. There's lots of weird holes for caves and whatnot scattered around the area, and I'm getting really tired of almost falling in them. I patched them all up, and then did my best to smooth out any awkward lines in the terrain, and make the whole place look more natural. Even though this took almost an hour and a half for me to do, I definitely think it was worth it if we take a look at the before and the after. We also have more space for builds now, which I'm sure is going to come in handy. And to celebrate making it past the halfway point in this challenge, I think it's mandatory that we take a break to pet my cats. I'll also use this as an opportunity to remind you to subscribe and like the video so that I can afford to keep feeding them. Jokes aside, I started day 55 by killing a bunch of mobs since I stayed up too late on day 54. Once they were all dealt with, I spent the rest of the day cutting down oak trees. On day 56, I thought it'd be fun to add a tiny pond beside our mine entrance. This will also give us an infinite water source nearby, which will definitely be nice since up until now I've been running down to the river whenever I need water. While digging the hole for the pond, my shovel broke, which really sucked, but I grabbed a new one and then continued the build by replacing the bottom with stone and then adding a few slabs. After that, I filled it up with some water and then added a few decorations around the perimeter. I only had 2 sugarcane left after crafting all of the bookshelves, but as it continues to grow, I'll expand it around the area. With the pond finished, I went back home to repair our Silk Touch shovel, and then gathered up some podzol since I want to use it in our next build. I had the fun idea to build a sweet berry farm, so I started putting it together, and then finished it on day 57 by connecting it to our path system. This new addition is pretty simple, but I think it really helped bring some life into the area. I wasn't done building farms yet though, as I want to add a wheat farm in front of our house. I started by creating a border out of oak leaves, which I also hid some water sources under. After tilling all of the dirt and filling the area with wheat seeds, I dotted some spruce fences around to look like some branches. On day 58, I finished the wheat farm by adding some short grass and flowers scattered around the area. We really need a more permanent place for our cows, so the next thing that I want to build is a barn. Without wasting any time, I did a bit of terraforming to make room for it, and then started by creating some pillars using barrels and stripped spruce logs. I continued on day 59 by extending our pathway to the build and then creating the entrance. After that, I started building up the walls more using mainly deep slate and tough blocks. To get some airflow into the building, I added some simple window designs using spruce fences and spruce trapdoors. I started adding in some larger window designs, and then for some color, I thought we could add some oak leaves with flower pots on top. On day 60, I added the same window designs to the back of the barn, and then got started on the roof. I built the trim out of spruce wood so that it would match our starter house. I also added in some pillars that look like vertical slabs using my classic double trapdoor trick. I want to use packed mud for the roof, so I took a break from building to quickly expand the sugarcane around our pond, and then I spent the rest of the day turning dirt into mud. After making a bit more mud on day 61, I crafted up all of the blocks that we'll need to finish the roof. I thought a combination of oak and packed mud would look interesting, so I went for it. To be honest, I wasn't really sure if I liked it at first, but it started to grow on me the more blocks that I placed down. After finishing the roof, the sun was beginning to set, so I went to sleep and planned to finish the interior of the barn on the next day. Before actually getting started on the interior though, I added a couple of decorations by the door and then placed lanterns all around the barn to stop mobs from spawning. Getting started on the interior now, I first want to make the ceiling more presentable. I added a few beams stretching across the top and then filled in the rest of the gaps using spruce stairs, slabs, and trapdoors. Next, I hung some lanterns from the beams and then added a crafting table and chest, which are always good to have around. I created a pen on either side of the barn using fences and fence gates. After a few more minutes of reworking things and adding a couple of final touches, I was happy to call the interior finished. However, we're missing something kind of important for a barn, and that's animals. I actually got rid of our old cow pen when we did all of that terraforming earlier, so I had to run around and find a couple of stray ones to bring into the barn. I was running low on wheat, so I harvested our new farm and then placed the wheat inside of our pen to have on hand. On day 63, I went back to our pond and used some string to control the heights of the sugarcane. I feel like having them at different heights makes it look a lot more natural, which I really like. After that, I saw that some grass had spread into the path near the sweet berry farm, so I fixed it up and got it looking good. I thought a diagonal building near our house would look cool, so I spent the rest of the day building it up. I spent the next 2 days working on it as well, but I just couldn't get it looking the way that I wanted, so I'm gonna be honest, I just tore it down on day 66 and acted like the whole thing never happened. I felt like I needed a small break from building after taking that L, so I decided to go on an adventure. I stumbled upon a village, which didn't really have anything too crazy, but I did find a brewing stand as well as some carrots. And it's also nice to just know that we have villagers nearby in case we ever want to do some trading. Next, I collected a bunch of sand so that we can use it for glass in future builds. I also saw a bee nest, which was awesome, so I waited for all of the bees to come home and then chopped it down. On day 68, I went back home and dropped off all of the items that we got. I also placed the brewing stand that we found upstairs, as I felt like this was the perfect spot for it. After that, I spent the rest of the day working on a new sugarcane farm. After planning where I wanted my water sources to be, I added all of the water and then covered them with slabs. I put in pathways in between to make everything easy to access, and then I planted all 4 sugarcane that I currently had to my name. I continued building the farm on day 69 and 70 by first adding a wall out of cobblestone surrounding the entire thing. To detail the wall, I mixed in some mossy cobblestone and also added leaves, flowers, and grass surrounding it. We still need to fill in the rest of the empty crop space, but after adding some lanterns to light it up and connecting it to our path, I was happy to call the farm finished for the time being. The next thing that I want to build is a greenhouse, so I spent all of day 71 down at the river collecting sand. I do wish we had a desert nearby, since that would be a lot easier, but I guess this will do for now. I need coal to smelt all of this sand, but I'm almost completely out. So after planting some spruce trees on day 72, I went down to the mines to gather up some coal. While mining, I also found my first emerald in this world, which I guess was a bit exciting. And after gathering close to 4 stacks of coal, I went back home. Once I was home, it was day 73, and I started by smelting all of the sand with the coal that we just gathered. Our spruce trees had grown, so I chopped them all down since we're going to need a decent amount of wood for our greenhouse. After that, I checked in on our sugarcane farm and continued to expand it. I also harvested the wheat farm and bred the cows before calling it a day. On day 74, I started gathering up all of the materials that we'll need to build our greenhouse. I thought we had everything we needed, but I totally forgot about the white dye in order to make white stained glass. My idea to solve this problem was to go to one of the skeleton spawners that we found earlier and farm skeletons for bones. Using bones, we can make bone meal and then turn that into white dye. Everything was going to plan, and I almost had enough bones when of course my shield broke. I thought, it's fine, I have full diamond armor, no worries, I'll be careful. 10 seconds later, a skeleton spawned with a fire punch bow. I'm telling you, I went down to 1 heart trying not to die. It was truthfully one of the scariest moments of my life. With my butthole clenched harder than it's ever been clenched before, I managed to dig into the wall and hide before I died. After healing all the way back up, I carefully gathered the rest of the bones that I needed and then went back home as fast as possible. By the time I got home, it was day 75, and the very first thing that I did was make a new shield. After that, I started crafting and organizing all of the blocks that we need in order to build the greenhouse. And that's when I realized that I'm a big idiot and misremembered the recipe for dyed glass. I thought you needed 1 piece of dye for each block, but you actually only need 1 dye per 8 blocks. So basically, I just gathered 8 times as much white dye as we actually need, and I almost died for it too. Oh well, we're alive, and I guess that's what matters. I continued the day by removing grass and prepping the area that I want to build the greenhouse on. With all of my materials organized and ready to go, it was finally time to begin constructing our greenhouse. I went for a simple wood frame design, and then used a lot of glass, which is perfectly fitting for a greenhouse. Next, I connected the build to our path system, which made it look a lot more in place. I spent the rest of day 77 building a pathway down the middle of the greenhouse, lighting up the inside with lanterns, and adding flowers all around the outside of the building, which really gave it a nice pop of color that it was missing. The reason I actually wanted to build this greenhouse in the first place was to have an area for a bee farm. So on day 78, I started planning out where I wanted all of the beehives to go. After hiding campfires in the ground and covering them with trapdoors, I used stripped birchwood to indicate where I eventually want the beehives to go. In total, we're going to have 12 beehives, which I think should be more than enough for the time being. At the back of the greenhouse, I added some storage and a crafting table, as well as a few decorations just to bring the build to life a little bit. After that, I added a bunch of flowers all around, which are required for bees to produce honey. Just as I was finishing putting down the last flowers, the bees came out of their nest, so I used the opportunity to breed them. To make our life easier, I placed some bottles and shears in one of the chests so that we can easily collect honeycomb and get honey bottles. I spent the rest of day 78 blending the greenhouse into the surrounding area using grass and flowers. I started day 79 by breeding our bees again, and then I also placed a bunch of flowers in the chest to have handy when we need them. Our greenhouse was finished now, which felt really motivating, so I immediately started preparing for our next build by crafting a bunch of copper blocks that we're going to need. I want these blocks to be on the later stages of oxidation, so I started placing everything down on the ground 4 blocks apart. By the time I was done placing everything down, it was already day 80. It's going to take a while for all of this copper to age, so I decided to go check on our bee farm. I collected our first honeycomb and then used it to craft a beehive. I replaced one of the stripped birchwood blocks with the hive, and will continue this process until eventually we have 12 of them. Our sugarcane farm could use some love, so I decided to tackle that project next. My original plan was to have this entire area be sugarcane, but I thought we could also use this space for a pumpkin and carrot farm. I started by adding the pumpkin farm in the middle, and then the right section can be used for carrots. Sadly, we don't actually have enough carrots to fill the entire thing yet, but we'll continue expanding it as it grows. The next build that I want to make is a couple of silos, so I started gathering up all of the materials I'll need on day 81. I determined that the main thing that I need is bricks, so I went down to the river and started collecting a bunch of clay. For the ones that weren't too deep in the water, I used my fortune pickaxe to get more clay balls per block. I continued collecting more clay on day 82, and then went back home once I thought I had enough. Back at home, I started smelting everything, as well as turning the clay blocks I mined with my shovel into clay balls using my fortune pickaxe. While the clay continued to smelt, I went to check on our bees. After breeding them and collecting some honeycomb, I was able to craft 3 more beehives, which was great. Another block that we're going to need to build the silos is granite, so I went down to the mines and gathered some up. On day 83, I turned the rest of our clay into clay balls so that we can continue to smelt them into bricks. After that, I gathered the rest of the materials that we'll need to build the silos. We have everything that we need now, except for the copper that's of course still aging. To finish off the day, I bred the bees, and we have quite a few of them now. Since the copper still needs a few days to age, I decided to distract myself by building another crop farm. I had all the materials to build the farm except for birch leaves, which I quickly collected with some shears. I began constructing the farm in this open space beside the greenhouse. After tilling the ground, I covered the water sources with slabs and lit up the farm using lanterns on top of some walls. To enclose the farm, I used a combination of oak and birch leaves with spruce gates in between the gaps. After that, I filled the farm with wheat seeds and then connected it to our pathway. On day 85, I finished detailing the farm by adding some shortgrass and flowers surrounding it. I continued the day by breeding the bees again and collecting more honeycomb. I really like the look of the boulders near the mine entrance, so I added a few smaller ones on the hillside behind the greenhouse. I also had the idea to exchange the torches on the mine entrance with some lanterns, and I'm really glad I did because I think it looks a lot better. I spent the rest of the day collecting spruce leaves as I want to build a custom tree while I continue to wait for the copper to age. All of day 86 was dedicated to building our first custom tree in this world. I thought a spruce tree would fit the area quite nicely. A little detail I tried to incorporate was using birch leaves to look like highlights or some sort of new growth on the tree. Finally, our copper had aged enough, so I started day 87 by collecting it. And using the honeycomb from the bee farm, I also waxed some of the weathered copper just so that it doesn't fully age down. I think having a bit of variety in how aged the copper is will make the silos look a lot better. I spent the rest of the day doing some basic terraforming to make room for the silos. I spent day 88 and 89 building 2 silos. I got the idea to build these when watching Disruptive Build's Ultimate Farm video. I thought they looked really cool and helped fill out the space in a fun way. For the main tower part of the silos, I used a combination of bricks, granite, terracotta, and just a tiny bit of packed mud. And then the roofs are made using the aged copper that we waited what feels like 10 years for. For some details, I added some spouts to the sides, as well as ladders so that you can reach the top of the silos. I'm really happy with how these turned out, and I think they added a lot of atmosphere to the area. I want to build more custom trees, so I gathered a bunch of spruce wood and leaves on the start of day 90. After that, I spent some time expanding the carrot farm, and I was able to get the whole thing filled in, and it's looking a lot better now. We also needed more birch leaves to build custom trees, so I spent the rest of the day running around and collecting some with my shears. I spent the next 2 days building 5 more custom spruce trees. I used more or less the same design as the first tree that we made, but I made sure to vary the trees a bit in height, size, and shape, just to make them look a little bit more natural. I annoyingly got interrupted by pillagers, and it started to rain, but I pushed through and got all of the trees built. On day 93, I was back up to level 30, so I enchanted my chest plate and got protection 4, thorns 2, and unbreaking 3. I went to check on our bee farm, and after collecting the honeycomb and breeding the bees, I was able to make 4 more beehives. We only need 3 more now to fully finish the farm. I harvested the carrots next, and decided to expand them into the lower farm beside the greenhouse as well. I continued the day by doing a few more odd jobs, like breeding the cows and smelting down our iron and gold. Day 94 also consisted of more odd jobs. First, I converted a bunch of dirt into mud so that we can craft more of our packed mud. After that, I bred the cows again, and then went on to add patches of coarse dirt and grass underneath of our custom trees. I feel like this somehow makes them look a little bit more in place. As we're quickly approaching day 100, I wanted to get our area looking as polished and put together as possible. So after adding a small flower patch, I went around and mixed in more of our packed mud into the pathways, which really helped add more texture and color variation. I started day 95 by gathering a bunch of honeycomb and breeding the bees. After that, I ran around and did a bunch of basic terraforming all around the area. I was doing my best to smooth out any of the weird terrain that I was seeing, as well as adding more shortgrass and flowers scattered around the area. I ended the day the same way that I started, by collecting more honeycomb and breeding the bees. I began the next day by adding a few more flower patches around the greenhouse. After that, I harvested the carrots that were ready and finished filling in the remaining sections of the farm. I thought it'd be interesting to update our map and see just how much has changed since day 38 when we made it. It looks so cool now, and it's super rewarding to see all of our new builds on the map. I was almost completely out of diamonds at this point, so I repaired my pickaxe a bit and then went down into the mines to try and get some more. I continued mining into day 97, and by the time I was done, I managed to get 27 diamonds. Not too bad at all for just 2 days of mining. I started day 98 by making and enchanting a brand new diamond shovel. I was super lucky and got Silk Touch, Efficiency 4, and Unbreaking 3. After that, I went to the bee farm and collected even more honeycomb. Using that honeycomb, I waxed a bunch of copper trapdoors so they wouldn't oxidize. I then replaced all of the oak trapdoors around our sweet berry bushes with our brand new copper ones. It's a simple change, but I think it looks so much better now. I spent the rest of the day doing basic terraforming beside the sugarcane farm. I can't believe it's already day 99. I want to do a tour on day 100, so it's our last day to add any finishing touches that we want. I started off by placing some glow lichen around the wheat farm to hopefully stop mobs from spawning. After that, I filled in this open space in front of the barn with a cart, which also adds a nice element of storytelling since it explains how people here would be moving things around. The last thing I did on day 99 was collect more honeycomb so that I could make the last 3 beehives that we needed in order to finish our bee farm. I'm really happy that we could fully finish that project before the 100 days were up. But with that, I think it's time to slow things down a little bit and take a tour together on day 100. Alright, so I thought we'd start the tour at our starter house here. I'm really happy with how this came out, all the texturing in the walls and everything. I often struggle with interiors, but I think this one came out quite well. It's also really functional. Take a look at our little map here. I really love how our area turned out, and we'll take a quick look upstairs as well. For this area, I didn't really know what I wanted it to be, but kind of turned into this little storage room. Also put the brewing stand here. Taking a look at our enchanting room. Pretty simple, but functional. Did a lot of enchanting in here. The barn, honestly, I think it's not my best build ever, but I think it turned out all right. It's pretty simple, but it's also pretty practical, which I guess is the important part. And our silos, oh man, okay, I was waiting so long for this copper to age, but I'm really glad we went through the trouble. I think these really add a lot to this area, really help with that farm vibe, I guess you could say. We have our farm over here with the 3 little sections, our sugarcane, pumpkins, and then our carrots over here. Heading over to the lower section, I love this view coming down the stairs where you can see our greenhouse and our little farm down there. I think let's go check on the bees first. I really love how this greenhouse came out. It's pretty simple, but it's also like, I don't know, it just kind of worked. I know it's a lot of spruce and maybe it's a little bit basic, but I'm happy with it. Added a few nice details in here, some nice texturing. But let's go check on the actual bees themselves. This is actually my first time ever experimenting with bees in survival. It was a lot of fun though. I love the little, the baby ones. They're super cute. And then over here we have our carrot farm. I think it filled out this area and just added a nice little pop of color as well as more, you know, nature, life, whatever you want to call it. We of course have our sweet berry farm. I'm really glad that we swapped out the trapdoors. I think these copper ones just look so much better than the oak ones. I really love what we did with the texturing in the cliff face and adding these larger boulders. I did try to keep with like the vanilla terrain, but just sort of make it look better, I guess. And of course we got a lot of blocks from down here that we used to build all this stuff. So it was also pretty practical. And then over here we have our pond. I think it added a nice little pop of blue over here, as well as giving us an actual water source, because before that I was having to run down all the way over to like this lake river area. And it's just a pain going up and down this hill all the time. So I thought having a water source closer by would be a good idea. We have all of these custom spruce trees that I made. In the past, when I've made custom spruce trees, I put a lot more leaves than I did with these ones. You can actually kind of, you know, see through them, which I like. And I think these really help just kind of fill the area in around our builds. But I think with that, oh, I almost forgot our dog here. We should use one of our name tags to name this guy. If you have any name suggestions, let me know. But I think with that, you know, the sun is starting to set. I don't want to stay out here too long and have some mobs spawn. So let's go to bed for the very last time in this video. I can't believe we actually survived the 100 days. We had that super close call where we almost died down to 1 heart, but we made it and I'm really happy. I really hope you enjoyed this 100-day challenge as I had so much fun playing in this world. I would love to continue playing in it, so be sure to let me know what I should build next. And if you want to explore this world for yourself, the world to download is available on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching and happy building.